All right, everyone, thank you for coming, and hopefully everybody's now full and happy after lunch. My name is John Gross, I'm the Associate Director at the Center for East Asian Studies here at Stanford, and I'm happy to be chairing our panel today on launching the Global Studies Associate Degree Transfer. We have with us Patricia Gibbs Stayte, who's a Professor of Sociology at Foothill College, and Katie Eagan, who's Professor of English at Las Positas College. And they're going to share with us some of their experience and research. We put together about 7 questions that we thought we would ask them to address. And then we'll have some time at the end to have a conversation, and people can talk about their experiences or frustrations or as they wish.
Hoping to learn from you too.
So I think our first question was basically, how was the ATT development on campus and who's involved in the process?
Do you want me to
Sure,
start?
why don't we just...
So you'll see, John, if you hit the next slide, I think, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff up there that basically what I tried to do was to just document everything so that when people are looking at this down the road, they'll have something to refer to. So if you don't want to listen to me, you can just read. You can just be silent. But basically what happened in terms of the process for us at Foothill, and also one thing I want to say in starting is that I know that there's a lot of people in this room and that a lot of you have a lot of really great experience with this. So we want to kind of move through this and then get to the discussion so we can all network and sort of share what we understand is going on, because that will make it better going forward, I think. But basically on this slide, I had a couple of different fellowships at Stanford that got me interested in global studies and in internationalizing the curriculum. And I think in the first one, that was the Shri one, it was that one where, in terms of the deliverables, I had said, I'd like to do a course module piece that's global studies related, but I also love curriculum and I love curriculum development, and I'd love to see something much larger go on, even maybe to like a program level global studies program. So that's where I sort of started working on it, doing research, and you'll see up there some of that. Then what happened was pretty much at the same time, we had similar things going on Foothill's campus. We have a lot of fantastic people on our campus, and many of them are here today. And we had somebody that I'm going to borrow something from my esteemed colleague here, Scott Langford, who I thought was so amazing when we start just talking through email on campus. And he said he would start emails by saying, hey, all globals out there. And I thought, it's such a powerful word, but we became kind of globals. And so, figuring out who your globals are and who people are who are interested in developing this material. So you'll see up there people like Michelle Palma, who, it's interesting, she's actually no longer at Foothill, but she started to spearhead the development of the ATT program when it became a reality. There's a lot of administrators in there at Foothill who will kind of say, hey, I saw this come by. So Michelle got onto that, and interestingly, she was at Foothill, and then she actually ended up getting a job at Golden West College, because who can afford to live in the Bay Area? And I see Golden West was in one of the first group to get their ADT, so she just carried the work down there. And she's fantastic. I miss her so much. But Catherine Maurer in anthropology, and you can read the list there. We have Brian Evans over here, Maloney Gandhi, and et cetera. And I also want to say that really one of the really great things at Foothill is that we have administrators that are some may disagree in here, but they're very skilled at curriculum development. And 2 in particular, we have Mary Venata, who's our Foothill, we have a curriculum coordinator, and that's her full-time job, is to take the curriculum and make sure that it gets submitted where it needs to go properly, and all the things are done properly. And then we have Bernie Day, and where would we be without Bernie Day? She is our articulation officer, and she is magic. She is just unbelievably great. And she travels around and gets all this information and brings it back to campus and will say, hey, I saw this come by, are you interested in working on it? And so, though particularly Bernie spearheaded making sure everything was done correctly. In April 16th, 2017, our ADT was approved by the State Chancellor's Office. I've got a list coming up here that I think might be pretty correct on what the development of those ADTs has been like in the 114 California Community College system. And in September 2018, our first Global Studies course is scheduled to be delivered online because we feel that if we try to offer it in a face-to-face format, it won't make, because we need a minimum of, well, it shifts around, but depending who you ask, like 120 or 2. Well, not actually, like 20 to, I'm being facetious, but anyway, there's just a number that they're looking for in order to offer it. So that's kind of the key people and how it kind of
Can I
develops.
ask you a quick question about that course?
Sure.
Who's teaching it? What discipline are they from? It's a really
Yes,
interdisciplinary
yes,
course.
yes. And later we're going to talk
Okay,
about
wait till later.
but later we're going to talk about the local AT versus the ADT and what's problematic about a local AA versus an ADT. So it's actually going to be Catherine Maurer from anthropology that's going to deliver that online. Yeah. So we can keep that going.
That's good.
And did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so the question was how
Yeah.
it developed, right? So
Yeah, key people.
I first came to the symposium at the suggestion of my dean, who just put it out to everybody, Dean Miller, who's now not with us. But that was in 2016, and I think I saw Mary Conroy, talk about the ADT, and I was really excited about it. And then I think you were a fellow right before me, and so I went on sabbatical, and I knew that one of the things I wanted to work on was globalizing the curriculum and maybe create a major. You know, that was kind of open-ended thing that might happen. So I looked at your presentation from the previous year, and then my handout that's moving around is sort of the TMC, right, the transfer model curriculum that you may have seen. And I saw this list, which now is very outdated, which is still online now, of everybody who has, you know, a global studies or international studies AAA or ADT. Almost all of these say AA, interestingly. But that's where I started to dig, you know, okay, well, what have they done and what did they have? And started to talk to people at different colleges, but primarily looked at their websites just to see what was going on. And then, like you say, just working with people on campus. Since I was on sabbatical and not physically on campus, I really wanted, and because I'm an English teacher whose courses other than world literature wouldn't really be in an ADT, I wanted to make sure that this wasn't just my pet project. It wasn't, you know, no one had buy-in. So it was really fun. I actually spent so much time just talking to people, you know, and not emailing them about SLOs or curriculum or some other, you know, committee work, but actually, hey, do you want to go have coffee with me and I'll come out to the college and we can, you know. So I just learned so much about people who had done Fulbrights or developed courses or things that I never knew about them at all, because we're always just focused on, you know, the day-to-day work that we do. So I developed my own coterie of globals, to use Scott's word. And then, yeah, just started to go through the curriculum process with a lot of support and help from administrative types like that. One of the people I connected with, Tom Orff, is a geography instructor, and he's going to be teaching the global studies courses. We chose to create them as global studies courses. There's lots of different ways to do that we'll talk about. And yeah, ours was approved right around the same time, you know, so that's interesting. So now we're offering our first, the major is active as of, you know, fall 2018, and we're offering our first global studies course in the fall, face-to-face, not online, although that's a good idea. It has 11 students in it now, so I'm going to draft Susanna to, you know, talk to every student she sees on the LPC campus and
I
make them
told like
enroll.
5 of them.
Oh, well, all right. See, I saw her in the library, and I said, you need to take this class. And then she's here. She's amazing. Okay. So yeah, that's my answer to that question.
So it sounds like you spent a lot of time sort of working one-on-one with people, and that kind of feeds into the next question, which is how did you build interest among faculty and administrators? And how did you grow that?
It's kind of symbiotic, I find, don't you find? It's like someone will get information and then they say, hey, did you hear about this? And it's just all people talking, and it's all kind of passion-based, I feel like, too. I mean, maybe not so much for the administrators, because they see this and go, oh, somebody should check this box. But for us, we're like, I mean, we could check any box we kind of want, right? So why choose this one? So it has to be something you're interested in. But yeah, I just said, so if you move to the next slide, I believe, you know, kind of demonstrating to all different majors on your campus the value of internationalized and global studies curriculum, you know, demonstrating the value of it. And that development of a group. I mean, I'm a sociologist, and I fully believe that nothing gets accomplished without people, right? And it's all about relationships. So developing relationships with people can help you move your purpose forward. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I think for me too, just like you said, I looked, because I had more time, it wasn't to the side of my desk, you know, we were joking because I was on sabbatical doing this. So I went through our whole catalog. I went, you know, kind of just, well, who's teaching what? Who do I want to talk to? Oh, I've always meant to talk to them about so-and-so, or I only know them, you know, based on saying hi in the hall. So talk to people, and then interestingly, we as a campus, just in the 10 years I've been there, and I'm sure Callie and others would agree, it's become much more diverse than it was when I was hired in 2003. And so, and we've had a lot of retirements and a lot of new faculty. So the long, or the short story is that, for example, our humanities program was very kind of focused on classical European texts, or, you know, we don't have a world history course, or other than Western Civ, you know, so there was already a lot of work happening to create new curriculum, so it was kind of perfect to tap into that excitement. There were a lot of new hires, and things were happening and continue to happen on that front. So now my challenge is to kind of see how this ADT can be massaged to accept more of those courses. And if they can't, think about whether to keep the AA, but that's another question for later.
Are you taking questions?
Yeah.
So we
Sounds like we're
we
kind
wondered-
of, that was not the
we
original one.
wondered if we could plow through. Can we plow? Is that okay?
Totally.
Is that all right?
Yeah, if you could
Because
jot down
we
your
got-
question,
yeah,
that'd be great.
keep your question and keep your comment, yeah. Okay, can we go to the
Yes.
next? Yeah.
So then that sort of leads to the next question. What challenges did you and your colleagues face?
And then if you can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
None of this is going to work if we don't have anywhere for
You
these
said
students to
period.
go.
Yeah.
None of this is going to work if we don't have anywhere for these students to go, because this is why we all got involved with this, right? We are, you know, sort of, I feel like we're policed a lot of the time in this system, and so they say, well, we think you should develop this, we invite you to participate in this process, so we do. But if the CSU doesn't do its job and provide pathways for these students, there's no point really to any of this, and then we'll probably end up getting blamed for it, unfortunately. So this has actually become kind of a problem. So these ADTs were developed in a number of waves, and they took the more standard topic areas and developed those first. So at Foothill, sociology was the first, if not one of the first, if not the first, ATT developed. So that ours went through and everything was fine, and we were like the first one. And we've had a lot of students using it, and there are a lot of pathways into the CSU for them, and so it's been relatively successful. Then the second wave of ADTs that we've developed, they started adding on more of these specialized areas like global studies.
Areas of emphasis,
Yeah.
they're called, I think.
Is that what they're calling them? Yeah. And so the problem is that the CSU in some cases seems actually unaware of the ADT program period. So our, it was actually Catherine Maurer, within the last couple of weeks, went to CSU Monterey Bay to have a meeting about the pathway from Foothill's ADT to their global studies program, and they said they'd never heard of an ADT before. And that's a really big problem, because CSU Monterey Bay, Long Beach, and San Francisco State, those were the three CSUs that were on the original, they were the original group that formulated all of this. So that's I thought that was a challenge.
Yeah, I don't see how that's even possible.
And then I've got some other stuff up here, but So as a result, our articulation officer, Bernie Day, has scheduled, she's taken this issue to the CID group that oversees all of this, and so they're going to be working on that. And maybe that's just like a next phase problem. So that's one problem. Do you want me to go through all my problems? I have 3 of them. Sorry, challenges. I know challenges is a better way to say it.
Yeah,
Do you want to go to 3.2? Oh, we're at 3.2. Oh my gosh, we're at 3.2. Okay, so every time we have submitted an ADT, AAT, AST, whatever they tell us we have to call it, application to the Chancellor's office, they 100% of the time return it with some problem on it. So if you have had something returned to you and you feel like you're the only one, you're not the only one. And they often it's mistakes that the Chancellor's office makes. And I have a suggestion, and that suggestion is to see, I would like to know who these people are, and I would like to invite them to come to these things so we could all network with them, and maybe if we got to know each other and we realized then, you know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of the time you're submitting it to a nameless, faceless bureaucracy and you never know what's going to come back. And some places have actually had one of the core courses denied or something like that. So they always nitpick over something. And sometimes it'll be a mistake that they've made that actually isn't our mistake. And then our articulation officer or curriculum rep will say, actually, we're on the quarter system, so our units are different than the semester system. And I have a note about that at the end of this presentation. So that's 3.2. And then 3.3, challenge 3.3, is back to the local AA versus ADT or AAT. There are lots of challenges, I find, with cross-listing courses. And so there's a rule there's a law actually in the community colleges on faculty service area, right? FSA. So that if
In the disciplines list, right?
In the disciplines list. So if John is an anthropologist and I'm an economist, and we have this global studies course, and we say, okay, John's going to deliver the course, and if it's a local AA and you've put the AA, I know this is getting complicated, you've put it in like econ, first off, where do you put it? But let's say you put it in econ, then John, you're an anthropologist, you can then, and you deliver that econ global studies course, you can then deliver any econ course offered at our institution. Which it doesn't really make sense, right? So it's the structure of the way and the rules that really determine how you can organize these things. There's also problems I find with AAs because you need a program. So what are you going to do at your institution? Are you going to create a whole global studies area, or you're going to house it somewhere? If you create a global studies department, you may not have any full-time faculty actually devoted to that department, and there's this thing that needs to be done every single year called a program review. Who's going to do that program review? Are we going to give it to the anthropologist, or are we going to give it to Katie? She loves doing that. But so there are these kind of structural conditions that create problems for the development of these things. So those are my 3. Those are my top 3 list.
And mine relate, I would just say, with the AA versus ADT. You may be aware, if you already had an AA at your college, that the systems office said you have to convert that to an ADT. If you didn't have one, you can just do one for the fun of it. Because you're global, we don't have to. But so then kind of the issue remains, well, what do you do with the local AA? So I'm still in the process of kind of figuring that out. My main concern was that the ADT was very narrow as far as what courses it accepts. And so I'm still learning about that. And also the ADT does not require a language, for example. Because, and I was just talking to Mary, who is a person who makes those decisions you were talking about earlier and sends things back.
Mary Conroy is? Oh, stick around. No wonder she wanted to get out of here.
She said, I'm not going to come because she knows a lot already. But I absorbed everything I could from her before coming. In any case, because I was saying to her, you know, I can't decide if I want to keep the AA. Oh, that's right, because she was saying a lot of the CSUs didn't require a language, so requiring it here, you know, they didn't feel like it made sense. But then, of course, just as a logical person, you feel like, how could you do global studies without having to take the language? But so I think it would kind of become a counseling thing where you'd want to make sure, you know, either the student really knew where they were going, or to hedge their bets and just for their own education, they would be sure to take, you know, because you have to start, let's say you go to Berkeley, they're assuming you're going to have not just the first year, but the second year done by the, you know, so 4 semesters for us, you know, by the time you get to them. So if you're a student trying to go over and you don't have any, you know, you're starting at square one, that would be bad. So, so that'll be, you know, I think we'll really have to be talking to counselors, you know, about advising in a very aggressive way. And then as far as, deciding, you know, the disciplines list, where it's going to go, whether you create a program or embed it in some other program, or all things that are potential hurdles, but, you know, we just keep, every step you go through, you learn something new that you have to figure out. And so far it's been okay, but, you know, it's definitely, now what we're facing is sociology instructor, friend of mine who hadn't been around on campus very often when this was happening due to a family emergency, wasn't getting all my information about this happening, and she feels that the sociology, the global change course that they offer is very similar to our GS1 course. So then those are issues, right, of, you know, competing for students, and that's happening. The more we develop new courses, that's going to be a problem across the board. So trying to collaborate as much as possible with other people, cross-listing things or offering them at different times or whatever it ends up being, you know, just so you're not cannibalizing each other.
Given all the variables that you've already enumerated, like what would be your suggestions for people who want to create an ATT at their institution?
Well, just to start with the TMC, I mean, really, right? So there's 5 areas that you can see from this handout, and a student only has to complete courses in 4 of them. They have to select 5 courses total. So just seeing what you already have, I suppose, you know, would be one way to start talking to people, like I said. Starting to have with an expert like this articulation person you're talking about, or whoever, talking about where it's going to go, and trying to, now that you know that these are potential roadblocks. I mean, I and probably you were discovering them just as we went along.
Right.
Okay, what do we do with this little fire? Okay, what do we do with the next little fire? So maybe if you can be aware of those problems, or, you know, roadblocks in advance, and kind of strategize, I suppose. I wasn't strategizing because I didn't know anything.
And you know, keep in mind, they do that as their job, right? Most of us are hired as classroom instructors, right? So they are really the bridge between these systems, and so they have a wealth of knowledge, I think. And one thing I'd add, after you look at the TMC, is to then go ahead and see what interest there is. What I said for number 4, like number 4 is are we on to advice?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, just collaboration. Yeah, and also, you know, then if you're going to go forward, then look at developing one of these 2 courses. Writing the courses, Introduction to Global Studies and Global Issues, which are the 2 core courses for the.
And if you're unfamiliar, these descriptors are online. You know, so they're essentially just really stripped down course outlines. So because I was the one on sabbatical, we just kind of ended up writing them, but I would run them by people. How does this sound? And create SLOs for them, which you have to do too. One thing we didn't talk about, I don't think yet, was assessing the desirability or the demand for it on campus. That can be tricky, but I'm sure your campuses do this too. We have surveys that our institutional researcher designs for students when they're applying and coming in. So they will, I assume at your colleges too, say potential majors that they're interested in. So every year, I can't remember, I have the details at home, but you know, a lot of students were saying they were interested in what we then called international studies. But then when I asked Rajinder for the data, well, have there been any people who've gotten this AA that, you know, I didn't even know it existed before I started my sabbatical. I founded the catalog and went, oh, we already have one. It was very weirdly set up too. I don't know, it could be 20 years old. I don't even know how old it is. But it turned out in the past 20 years, only 4 people got the AA.
Yes.
So initially I thought, oh my gosh, I'm creating this thing for only 4 people in 20 years. But then he told me about the intake surveys, you know, that there's interest, but if students don't see a clear pathway, it can be confusing. And our college doesn't have, we have some, but we don't have a lot of interdisciplinary majors. So if departments aren't used to, or counselors too, aren't used to really working together a lot, or if there's not a club around it, or, you know, you can see that students might not even really know about it. So that's kind of the next phase, the education phase for them, even knowing that this is a thing. So
what I found interesting on your handout, you've got Deanne's Global Studies.
That's old, yeah.
Yeah, no, but only because I was talking to Katie about this yesterday. When I was doing my research in the fellowship, I thought, oh, our sister college has a Global Studies AA. And I went and spoke to them, and they said no one has taken the courses in this AA for so long, and we just haven't gotten around to deactivating it. So they've now since deactivated it, and I thought this is kind of, you get in these things where you're like, why, or is there demand for this? But I wonder if maybe their intercultural studies program was actually competing with that. So it's kind of Byzantine a little bit. Do you want to?
Yeah, that I think leads us really well to the next question, which what financial and policy issues would be helpful for others to think about or know about?
Yeah.
Enrollment management.
So so I have on the next slide, I have 3. 3 is the number today, people. 3. I have 3 things here. So one, people might not realize that Foothill De Anza Community College District is in a budget downturn, and we've got a number of big budget issues that we're facing in the next few years. And that's always bad for course development and program development and growth in an area, because if they're cutting in some areas, why are they going to grow in others? And it just doesn't work very well. So this is going to affect the courses we offer and how often those get offers, and the whole idea of whether a course is going to make. So that's why the one challenge is that. So the fall 2018, that's part of the reason why I think that it was offered online first too. So we'll see. The next slide is really quite seriously lack of time that faculty have for this kind of stuff. You just get stretched so thin, and it's great if you can create some space in a fellowship, but even that, really, you're kind of doing the work off the side of your desk. At Foothill, if we do fellowships, they say great. Well, actually, they don't even say great. They don't say anything. There's no notification of it or anything. You're really just driven all on your own to fight your way over here like a little salmon going upstream, you know. And so certainly a solution there would be to, you know, fund the work as much as you can, or for our home institutions to actually give us real credit for doing this in terms of course release or something like that makes it possible to keep that excellence in curriculum development going. And then slide number 3, and this is very interesting, I thought too, is the Janet Napolitano announcement from about, I don't know, I'm losing track. Was it 3 weeks, 2 months ago, something like that? And it's the UC system has these, it's called Transfer Pathways 21 program. And if my thinking is, if the CSU pathways are not clear, or they're not aligned, or people are getting stopped, what are the ways forward with this? And so this is another kind of door that's opened up, and it looks like for global studies there might be some movement with anthropology and sociology. And actually, if you go to the next slide, I put in some information on what the UC Pathways 21 is, and the reason why it's called 21 is because there's 21 majors that they've got there. So I might be blocking those, but I think you can go to the next slide. And these ones are, oh, right, okay, so then this is I kind of like you, I think we did this really well. You did the AAs and I looked at the ADTs, but in 2016 there were 0 ADTs in the 114 system. By 2017 there were 5. I put Foothill in there in 2017 because our curriculum department told us it was 2017. And then we got, Las Positas, and I don't even know if that's right. And Chabot has one. So I'm not sure if this is exactly correct, but it's pretty close. And so slowly you see them coming on to a total of about 14 now. Yeah. So that's pretty much all my data. That's pretty much all that I prepared to talk about. Did you want to add anything to the last question? Was the financial and policy?
Yeah, policies.
Just enrollment management, just making sure that someone gives you something. You have to take it from somebody else to offer it, and then budgets, division, we're organized into divisions that have various disciplines within them, and so the next phase is kind of for me to figure out, well, where can I get money to do certain events to generate interest, or all those things we were talking about. We have a foundation that I've talked to a little bit, so maybe going to your foundation is one place. I suppose we have an advantage of globalization being considered a hot topic, or when you hear Mitchell's paper, he's talking about universities moving towards this cosmopolitan, and how that's interesting because there's connections to corporate sponsorships and things that don't seem to have much to do with what we do yet. If some of those people are on a foundation and want to support something, then I'm all for it. So that's just another piece of information as far as finances.
You have some sources
I've
here,
just
right?
got some sources listed there. When I was doing my original research, I had these great, it was actually Mary Thomas in the Foothill Library was getting me some really great images of the development of all the ADTs. There's some really powerful images out there, but they're hard to find and they don't get updated as regularly as I would like. But you can see like all of the ADTs and then every single college and then who's got one and who doesn't, and I liked those. So I got from, I think it might have been the slide before, this Raul Arambula, I got some stuff from him, and then interesting, I stopped hearing from him, so who knows, but so the chancellor's office, so there's good places to find. And I really think that I'm so pleased that Stanford continues to run programs like this and reaches out and provides a space and provides a bridge for this important work to be done. So I want to thank Stanford University, EPIC, all of the acronyms that are there. So many. That's why I was going to start today with so many acronyms, right? Because I think that without this, it would be a lot harder to make sense of this, and we're all quite sort of, sequestered in our own little places, and I don't see even my colleagues until I come on Stanford campus for this. So, and certainly people from De Anza, I see them more here than I do anywhere else. So I wanted to point that out.
I think we've covered the questions that we had originally posed to both Katie and Patricia, so I think we should open it up now and share everyone's comments.
There were 2 questions.
I teach comparative politics, I teach international relations,
Yeah.
but I've never really done things in global studies. So I wanted to know, is there a difference between global studies and international studies? Because you've got that all
No,
across.
I think as far as the name, when I was thinking about the name, well, you have to remember I didn't know our program existed. So I already had in my mind global studies. And then I was thinking, we already have international studies. No, I didn't like international as much just because it implied nation states, as your discipline.
Okay.
And so I kind of liked that
sure.
global was more,
Okay.
fuzzy. But as far as, your courses, if you have you do have a global studies program, they would automatically count for that if a student.
First thing you learn in IR theory is the nation state is not everything.
Well, there you go.
But, and so my other question was, didn't San Jose State work with Foothill De Anza like 5-6 years ago? They came to visit us. That's how this first began, I think. Remember Catherine
That's
Maurer
what I was
was
going to say when I
there?
was emailing that. Well, it's interesting that,
Yeah,
I mean, we should
they
try to
have.
recoup, I think it was more than 5 years ago, actually.
Yeah, maybe
It was
8
quite a
years
long
It
time
was
ago.
almost 10, but
And-
it's interesting
and
that you're
it-
having
it-
trouble getting the CSUs to do this
Yeah,
because
that
the
doesn't
original
make
impetus
sense.
of what got the sort of me labeling
Yeah.
people globals was that there was a dean
Yeah.
level guy at San Jose State whose name I'm forgetting, and there was some grant money. And
And
they got some
they're-
faculty together, and they were pulling faculty together,
Yeah.
And they were in
that's what got us
enrollment
going.
trouble. They were
Yeah.
in enrollment
Yeah, that's
trouble,
right.
And they were trying to bring us
Yeah.
all together to provide a pathway
Yeah, yeah.
from Foothill into, and it wasn't just Foothill, there
So
were
it
a
did start
bunch
with San Jose State, so we should
Well,
try
I
to
would
recover,
hope
we should
they're
try to
still-
recoup those San Jose State
Yeah.
connections. And I just
Yeah.
went to an event at San Jose State like this week too, so now I've got some people to talk to again, I was kind
And
of lapsing contacts. They're
Mary
engineering
Conway
group.
was just telling me she's delivering a global studies course at San Jose State, and she's at San Jose City, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we should try to recoup that in
Yeah.
addition to Monterey, because that was where the original impetus came from.
I know.
And
Well,
then while I'm
yeah.
piggybacking on Meredith's
Uh-huh.
question, I just want to say, like, it's nice for you to credit me, but I didn't have the energy for this part of it. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like moving to me to see
Oh.
that someone has carried the, sort of took it forward. You're doing the part that I am
Well,
not good at. I'm
and-
not good at the acronyms and the articulations.
Yeah.
I'm kind of this big picture guy. So I got the big picture going in, and I think it was fun to get everybody together. But I'm a little stunned that it sort of
It
kept
actually
going.
happened.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh,
And I think
thank
that's
you.
really,
Yeah.
somebody's really got to pick it up and move
Yeah.
it. in
Well,
our-
and it really wasn't me. I mean, what happened was you pushed the ball around, I picked it up, did the work in the fellowship, which kind of, but then at the same time I was doing that, then there were people on campus. So it was Catherine, it was John, it was a
Yeah.
bunch of people on campus who were also doing things, other people too, and Kurt Hewig and lots of
It's
people,
just been so
Dean.
much work,
And so it's
just like
little bit by
maze.
little bit, and then Bernie comes in and says, hey, who's doing this? And finds an unsuspecting person.
But even the
Says,
history
"Yeah,
of
I know,
that.
it's
It's interesting from the Stanford perspective too, just because, like, so welcome, this is where our system is so different, and then they keep changing, they keep moving the goalposts. That's why there's AAs and AATs, and then there were
They changed
ATTs
the
that
lines.
became ADTs, but then
Yes.
the CSUs that they're supposed to
then the
articulate to
UCs.
don't even know that they have them
Yeah.
apparently, which is a little bit
Well,
shocking.
that's crazy.
And all of this
Yeah.
kind of comes down, and now Napolitano wants to do, which I think is great, these guided pathways. So it's like we're in a very different place than Stanford faculty in the sense that we kind of work for all these other institutions that
Yeah.
capture. And that's the great thing for the students, like these units will transfer, and there are these pathways, but boy, keeping those pathways open is just a forest of acronyms, so I can't
It
say
really
enough
is.
about them.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
And that's what I was trying to say
Amazing.
too, Patricia. I remember going to those San Jose State
I went
things
to
and
those. That was a long
thinking,
time ago, yeah.
how much work will this be?
Yeah, I was like,
oh
oh my God.
And it's really interesting when you think about it, because it's like we're not that geographically far away from one another. And I don't really know that many people at my sister college campus, which is one exit down on the freeway, right? And yet we're so sort of myopic. And
Right.
so I think if anything, this at least breaks down barriers and and I think that's where we need to go in the education system, if I can just say that the longer I'm in this for, the more I think you're going to get a quality education really wherever you go. It's a myth that there's a difference in the quality. And so that's another reason why we need to network, and we need to collaborate, and we need to come together.
I think it's the other reason, I mean, you're saying it perfectly too, but I think my original excitement about this was that it's a way for us to talk cross disciplines.
Yeah.
Which
Yes.
we do a terrible, I mean, just like the
Yes.
whole system is sort of
Yeah.
discouraged you from doing.
We don't
This
have
is
to
the way
even
to do
talk
it.
in our discipline,
Right.
right?
By the way,
Yeah.
there was one point where we were trying to negotiate, like, who does it report to and all that, and I don't know if we're doing a big reorg too at Foothill, which I don't know much about, but
Yeah.
there was talk about creating an interdisciplinary studies division as a sort of shell, because there's always this thing
We
about
tried
who's
that, we didn't really follow that.
who's responsible
Yeah.
and where do you put the units and who gets the
Right.
wish, which is how we count our money.
Yeah.
Right. So like who gets the credits and who like,
Yeah.
and I still don't. That's one reason it's so hard, because
Yeah.
it falls between the cracks.
Right.
And there is no institutional structure at Foothill still, all these years
Whoever
later.
teaches it
can
gets
do
the credit.
interdisciplinary,
Whatever
yeah.
discipline teaches
But
it.
it can even get to like which dean wants to pull this part of that, all the accounting
Yeah.
sheets.
My thinking on that with the issues around the course development and how it gets credited and what it's called and whether you're cross-listing it and that kind of stuff, I've moved way far away from cross-listing because of those issues. And if they could get, maybe what we need is somebody to work on the law that says, just put some language in there that contains that a little bit. So John can deliver the course and doesn't own the rest of an area that he doesn't really have much familiarity in.
At Foothill, do you have FSAs attached to your course outline of record? Because we just started doing that, and there are some courses that have multiple teaching disciplines associated with them. Some are with an and, but more of them are with an or.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
so
So we'd
the-
have to change every one of our course outlines,
Yeah.
so and that might be.
The-
And then, the thing is, if you change them, depending on what area you're changing, that has to go through an entire process
Yeah.
from
Yeah, it
all
has
the
to
way
go
through
through
your
everything.
institution, and
Yeah.
if somebody,
Yeah. The
whatever, doesn't want to, approve, then you can be subjecting your entire curriculum to be,
The difficulty with the Introduction to Global Studies course, when you look at it, is it really is an interdisciplinary course. I mean, not only is this an interdisciplinary major, but once you get down to List A, most of our colleges have courses in those areas and they have disciplinary homes. Those first two courses, I don't know anybody on my campus who could walk in the door and teach those because they're very interdisciplinary. If someone has taught me 3 times, yes, they'll be able to teach them. Many people would.
Yeah.
But getting that started is hard. So we've
Yeah.
looked at, you're going online, we've talked about writing an internal grant proposal and having a team of faculty teach the course. Then you have all the logistics of load and everything else. I mean, it's
Right.
not a trivial problem. It's not a trivial problem. Especially if you're worried about
Yeah.
enrollment management.
A few years ago, I tried to develop this course called Soc 57, which was a course for foster youth, and it was a course about the foster care system and that kind of thing. And we came up with this novel idea that what we could do is deliver the course and have each piece of the course delivered by a different expert in the field. So you could have like a foster care family judge come in. You could have various people come in. You have foster people who've been through the foster care system come through and deliver the course that way. And we could never get it offered on Foothill campus because it was just too. They couldn't. And I've always been upset with myself for not getting that course through because I thought that would be really a great idea. And I have not given up on that. But I think, how can we have some level of innovation within this structure? I think it's great to be able to talk about ways that people have been able to be successful at that. Like, for example, writing a grant to see if somebody can research it and see how that can be.
But I also think the fact that you're offering the course online makes it easier for all the other schools that have the degree because as long as you have a course on your books,
Yes.
the residency requirement, actually I don't think the residency requirement is in effect for the AATs and ATTs anyhow, but that missing link, if it's available if it's available each semester somewhere in the state online, then
You
any of
can
us
do it
can offer
through the
this degree.
OEI, is what you're saying.
Yeah, through OEI or anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those classes will
Just
have to
thought.
be submitted to the OEI.
To the OEI, exactly. It could be.
Right.
it could
You
get
can
an
Still
OEI
sign
approval.
up. It doesn't have to be
Even
through
without the-
OEI.
even
I can
without
sign
the
up
OEI.
at your college.
Our
Right,
students
but you
are
have to
college, your
apply.
students are at our college.
Right,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
they really
yeah.
are, yeah, especially online, yeah. But even down the road, looking at getting OEI approval, so if a student couldn't get it, then there's a guaranteed spot for them. I mean, if it ever came to that point, it would be great. Yeah, I know. There's all these kind of little issues and this idea of if you're trying to do it off the side of your desk, it becomes very difficult, and you can get frustrated, and you can get stopped in one point, and then you're just stuck. And so I think it's great to have a network of people inside your institution and outside your institution.
I have a question. Callie, do you mind if I ask you a question? As a librarian?
It's worth 100% of your grade.
Because I'm just thinking of, you know, all this talk we've been talking about networking, and I was wondering about library, you know, because you guys are always asking us when we create new programs and courses, you know, can our library support this course, and what would your recommendations be for, you know, because the major's so interdisciplinary, kind of working with librarian faculty to kind of build a collection when we don't always have all the expertise ourselves, right?
Well, building the collection, I think, and this is my big call to action for anybody globalizing, creating this degree is make sure your library can support it, because you don't want to have a research project and then the global studies, and then they go to the library and it's like, well, I don't know. Here, you know. So that's one thing. But we do work with so many different instructors that it makes it easy to see the links. And I'm fairly new on campus still in the scheme of faculty. So I can't make all those connections as well, but I know one of our librarians, the ones that have been there longer, they make those connections really easily about, oh, you're doing this over here, oh, you know, you should work with this instructor there. And we often do, I've been quite interested in, we might do one for nutrition, is doing a co-teaching between the library and a nutrition, like a research project, intensive, you know, this is how to get health research and all that good stuff. And it's possible. I've heard that co-teaching is possible.
Yeah, it is. We've done it at Las Positas a while ago.
A unicorn class.
I mean, it's just crazy that it's so difficult to do something so simple.
It would be, it's so beneficial for the students to be, because one of the things that's the hardest is that transference of knowledge, right? How do I apply this to this over here? And if you have the teachers right there in the class, or this, you know, global studies group, how awesome would that be? I don't know that I have an answer to your question.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, since you were sitting there, remind them to work with their librarians.
How do we break down these barriers from the top down? That's my question, because I feel
Well, we're not the
there's so
ones
many
to-
restrictions and imposed on our teaching, and it's just, it gets to the point where you can't get any, you know what, you can't be creative or innovative, and it's just.
Well, in many ways, we serve too many masters, you know, and, you know, we have to have our courses articulated at various places, and again, Mitchell will talk about, you know, sort of all the silos of different disciplines, and you all have area studies and things like that, you know, is maybe sometimes struggling to get funding, but still is pretty vibrant compared to, you know, what we have as far as it's being institutionalized. So, I don't know.
Well, we do get brownie points for ADTs now. Most
We do.
schools are, I mean, I don't know if we stopped that, but for a while, every administrator was like, you can say
Here's one we
3
don't
magic
have,
words.
yeah.
You
But
know,
that's
they wanted to
disciplinary
they needed to
specific in
count
most
their
cases,
80 counts,
yeah.
right? So if you come to them and say, oh, it's a great new idea for another ADT, then that should open the door rather than close it.
Right.
At least in
There's
the
only
recent
some of
past.
them that are
So that's what-
interdisciplinary.
And that's what we did. We jumped on it. I jumped on it because I said,
Right.
we've got all these courses, we just need 2 courses.
Right.
We got
Just
back
like,
to
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that is a way to get
And
started.
now, and now
at
it's
least,
how
right?
we can do it. Could you go back to the slide that had those 21, the UC 21?
Oh, the pathways?
Yeah, which are kind of hard to read, but
Yeah,
one of
sorry.
the issues that I see with this degree, I don't think it's one that students are going to come in and say, this is my goal. Students are going to come in and say, I'm majoring in sociology, and oh look, because I satisfied my GE transfer requirements, if I just take 2 global studies classes, I can have this degree also. And I think that's the way through to the counselors, to have them advise toward it, because the transfer options in these areas are actually fairly limited at the CSU. And so, you know, they might not be limited at Stanford, but you're not taking a lot of our community college transfer students all across the state. I mean, you're taking some, that's fine, but we're not talking about thousands of students transferring into Stanford. And so,
I think it's like 6 or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. So I don't know, I
6 to
can't,
12.
my eyes are old and I can't really read that list, but if that list includes sociology and anthropology.
It does.
And those both have the AETs already.
Yeah.
The only students who are gonna take this are the rare student who's very interested in it.
Yes.
Or students whose counselors have said, here's something else you might be interested
Right.
along the way.
It'll help with
Pick
our
up
new
this
funding
class.
model.
Yeah.
One of the things that really struck me about everything you were talking about is how much it resonates with many of the things that we contend with here as well. So, I mean, just to rattle a few of them off, I mean, this,
Fighting back with new acronyms.
new acronyms. So, this seemingly insurmountable obstacle of interdisciplinarity. You know, we have a global studies minor, and there's also the question of who teaches Global 101? What does it look like? You know, we have an international relations department. What's the difference between international relations and global studies? And do people even intellectually have some sort of coherence or agreement on what that is, you know, and are these then going to compete with each other for student enrollments, et cetera? And our area study centers are present, are vibrant, but also, face these challenges of, we are not departments. The incentive structures, and we'll hear about this afternoon from Mitchell Stevens, these incentive structures that are in place for faculty are in place within disciplines and not across disciplines. And so we are conveners, and we also used to be, 4 years ago, International and Comparative Area Studies, and then we became Global Studies, and I think the name changed before the concept changed. And so many of these same conversations are happening here as well. And another one is there's an entry survey of Stanford freshmen, and so many of them, I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but a vast majority of them are interested in international experiences, international studies, and then they get slotted into their particularly CS and engineering and some other majors, and that's lost along the way. And something that our faculty director of global studies also identified is they don't have clear pathways that are readily visible to them and identifiable, and that are that have the value that getting the CS degree clearly has in many ways, both the monetary and sort of the social status and all of that. And so doing that work of making it visible, making global studies visible, and the importance of global studies and charting the pathways, et cetera, is really important. And I actually think, going back to your question about what's going to break the barriers down from the top down, I actually think it's going to be more of this. It's, people who are driven by sort of this passion more from the bottom up than sort of expecting these structures to change. So, well, I mean, I don't know how helpful that is, other than we're in the same boat in many ways. But which is why I think it's wonderful that we're having these conversations among our different institutions, and also continuing to come together and to brainstorm and address different aspects of the challenges.
Jovana, can I just riff off what you've said and go in a bit of a direction? Some of us were at a film that recently got shown at Foothill called Failsafe, and it's a documentary written, produced, directed.
Failstate.
What did I say?
Failsafe.
Failstate. It's written, directed, produced by a Foothill alum. And on the panel after the discussion was 3 people in the public education system. No, I'm not going to talk about it. But 3 people in it, and then one man who was representing kind of a privatized education system. And the discussion on the panel was all about how he basically was saying, look, if it's raining outside and you need to get from point A to point B, what are you going to do in a city? And everybody's like, you get an Uber or a Lyft? And he was like, these systems, these privatized, like corporatized systems are good. And this is the direction that education should be going. And just when you were talking about that, I was thinking, what if, in terms of our demand side, which is our students and their thoughts about how, you know, where is the global citizenry, where is the global sustainability, where is the, you know, where are all these things in my standard educational environment if it's not there? And I have to tell you, the K-12 system is onto a lot of this stuff too, where they can be a little bit more nimble. They can offer courses like this, so they get their appetites whetted. Like Palo Alto Unified has a social justice pathway, so those students come through there, and then where are they going to go with that? And if we aren't nimble and we don't have those things developed, where are these people going to go? Is there going to be a privatized system and they're basically going to take the Uber of education? You know? It's not a threat or anything, it's just sort of a philosophical thought. Like I think we need, and we are in this interesting position where I feel like we get policed a lot by these other systems, and if you've taught in a 4-year or above, often, and these issues aside, you can be assigned to teach a course and you're just told, well, just teach the course, and there actually isn't a course outline. There aren't SLOs that are in some bank somewhere that you read the list of 3 of them and you better be covering that and you have to measure it, and you have sort of the freedom to approach the subject matter from your academic standpoint, and they realize, you know, by hiring you that you have that expertise to do that, and that's just not how it works in the community college system, right? We are really beholden to so many rules. And so I'm kind of thinking about what is going to happen down the road in education with these kind of competing interests of these students who are coming from the new social media generation, and what we are, what we look like to them, what we offer to them. And I think it behooves us to work together, right? So I'd probably just kill discussion there. but I was so struck by what he was saying, and you know, when Scott was there, one of his points was, we think that the community colleges are actually the places that are colleges based in community, and we have had the ability to actually get things through a smaller bureaucracy more quickly, because we're not dealing with usually with layers and layers at our home campuses. But I think over time we've become embedded in those layers and layers at the state chancellor's office. Now we've got the CID, and we've got all these layers of bureaucracy that maybe 20 years ago, if you want, I don't know, you have more reference point for this, but if you wanted to create a course in German studies or what, you could just teach
humanities, poli-sci, no problem, got 38, and then they canceled it because it didn't have 40.
Where did that go? Where did that go?
When was that?
It's dead, 20 years ago.
What happened?
There's another layer of this that I wanted to respond to, though, because you got me thinking about my thanks partly to Epic and Trey. I've been working really hard on climate change across the curriculum. That's why I was down at San Jose State, by the way, where they were doing this incredible cross-disciplinary engineering, social service learning engineering around sustainability thing. But what I was thinking about was maybe we need to put it out there that most of us are framing global studies in a sort of social sciences and humanities frame, which is fine. I'm a humanities guy and a social sciences guy. But I think there's a huge hunger on the part of these students who are majoring in CS, who are majoring in civil engineering, who are majoring in the sciences, in the STEM fields and biology, to get something else, you know, so if you find issues, climate change being my big one, that are cross-disciplinary, not just between sociology and English, but also between engineering and English physics and English biology and English and it's an interesting way to go. And I do think that can be part of a global studies degree. Like, and I think it looks like the templates are coming down.
This one, though.
Yeah, not this one,
Yeah.
but it's just something to sort of like think about in terms of designing courses that can be add-ons for students as
Yeah,
well.
and I wonder.
That have science content, in other words,
Yeah,
like it's
that
not
are
just social science
cross-disciplinary.
content, but science content. And I was also going to mention that one example that I know of that where they do this team teaching interdisciplinary is in Sierra College, where they have a long-standing televised course that have guest lectures from each discipline, and they created a special, so when administrators always tell them we can't do this interdisciplinary stuff, like, well, how come Sierra College is doing this? And it's been a very successful course for years and years and years, and it goes back to the days of the rise of environmental studies, which was and is interdisciplinary. But there are ways to do it. It's just kind of the administrators don't have the template.
Right.
So, but I know that it's done in the community college system, and I know that Sierra College has been doing it for like 20,
And that
25
was
years.
environmental studies?
Yeah, it's
courses?
it is about the Sierras, right? So
Oh.
it's a course about the Sierras, and they have geologists, and they have historians, and they have anthropologists, and they have biologists. I mean, you can imagine. So it's just how many different lenses can you put on with Sierra Nevada?
Yes.
So that was, it's just something maybe to look at. I was familiar with it maybe 5 or 10 when I was getting my Tahoe book out. They co-published it, so that's how I found out about all of this.
Santa Rosa has a lot of team teaching too, or they did.
Yeah, I know
think
it
they
can be
just
done.
funded
So
it.
it's like, where is the
So
where are
we need,
examples of
maybe that's where
collaboration?
librarians can help us, but I think if we
Yes,
can present to administrators, look, if Sierra College can do this, and if Santa Rosa, if JC can do this, then why can't, if you can show them sort of successful models, sometimes that's what blows the lid off that we can't do it, it can't be done.
Someone else is doing it.
Somebody
And if
else
we're
is doing it, and
supposed
they're
to be
making money
best.
on it too, like it's a big course at Sierra College.
And
That'll be the
oh,
selling
so-
Well, but it is pretty, unfortunately, that's the way,
I
you can't,
know.
it's back to, if you can't get the students, then you put these, you spend 10 years putting a curriculum together, and then you've got 10 students, and then they cancel everything that you've worked on for 10 years, and it's just done.
Yeah.
So you have to deliver the students.
So wait,
or
once a
it
course
doesn't
is
happen.
discontinued?
Well, it wasn't, you just stop offering it and then it's discontinued.
It gets deactivated, yeah.
I salvaged it somewhat, I redesigned it and taught my part for a while. But, it's frustrating. You have.
I wanted to go back to your comment on the CS majors and the engineers, because one of the other things that San Jose State did back when I was teaching engineering is they advertised to their engineering students as a pull into their engineering program, but we're going to take a group of students, I don't remember, 20, 40, internationally in the Pacific Rim over the summer to do a global studies and area studies course that gets paired with that as a study abroad kind of thing. That's a way into your student population with the area studies, is to different than a minor, but a course that you're going to take because your discipline values you having a global perspective, and we're going to deliver it in a way that fits in with the constraints of what you want to do in your discipline. So I just wanted to stick that.
And we're having those conversations here too.
Yeah.
It's just that also takes, it's speaking across schools.
Yeah,
And
it's even more
it's-
silos, I realize.
Yeah.
It makes the problem worse rather
And
than better.
okay, so when I did the EPIC, which was last year, part of the research I did was I developed a research tool to canvas the over 300 global studies programs on Earth, 4-year programs. And I sent out the survey. I got not a great response rate, but a okay bad one. But I have just a few short questions to ask people to sort of say, if we are developing this, and we could potentially have a lot of students coming through to 4-year schools. What advice do you have? What problems did you have? Challenges, things like that. And I wonder if it's a good idea to sort of, I canvass the 4-year schools. What about canvassing the 114 for innovative design? So that because my one course I developed in sociology is called Sociology 8 is Popular Culture. And I got that course because, and this is what they tell us in the CCs, is if you can find the course at a lower division level, somewhere in the CSU or the UC, then you can articulate that course. But you can't find it; it doesn't exist on the earth at CC. And I found a lower division level popular culture course at UC Davis, and that's how I brought popular culture, which I think is a very important course in this day and age, to Foothill. It's a very successful course for about a decade. And so I'm wondering maybe about the idea of doing research on innovation in the community colleges. So we can say, well, this exists here and there because
So you
are
can
siloed.
find some of that already behind the scenes, and there's your articulation officer can pull some of those things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in how they're
Yeah.
offered, because in addition to this area of emphasis, there's now one with law and public policy that just came through. That we're also doing that is.
There's a social justice.
And there's a social justice one too. We're
yeah.
missing one course for that one.
Peace studies, yeah. This is the second wave, right?
Yeah, this is the second
Yeah.
one. And in order to have courses fit into the list A's, B's, and C's on those, you have to show that there's a course that it articulates with at the 4 years. And there's a backdoor and assist that your articulation officer can use to
Right.
go through and mine those.
Yeah.
You know, another audience aside from study abroad is the international students.
Oh,
Yes.
sure. That's why
And I've
Maloney
talked a
Montes.
little bit with our.
I mean, if you could work with advertising and some way to incentivize maybe, that would be
and that
interesting.
reminds me as far as events.
No, I know.
Engineering, it's
But
harder.
I'm just saying, if you could think that through somehow, maybe a first course and, I don't know, cut their tuition somehow, or I know we'd never do that now, but some way to incentivize it.
As far as collaborating with international students programs, I've talked with our person Sean Day a little bit about that. And as far as events, there's this, it's sponsored by the State Department, International Education Day. It's in October, I think, every year. But they've done things off and on for that, just out of his office. And I said, well, we should do something together and make this an annual thing, get the international students involved so they feel like more a part of the campus, because it's silly to have a global studies major if you're not engaging, on a deep level with the actual students who come from elsewhere on your campus. So that's kind of an idea of, not only to enroll global studies students, but just to kind of build a buzz around it.
And can I just say to shout out to CSM as well and Danny.
Danny's Global Speaker Series, Danny's Global Speaker Series is what we will eventually hang our Global Studies intro course on. We'll coordinate them so that the topics fit.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
That's perfect.
That's actually very innovative, right? It's very
Yeah.
integrated. And then what Danny has even gone to the trouble of doing is networking all across campus
Yes.
and providing sample activities for various areas, so that if you're in English, you say, well, can you bring your students and here's an activity you could, edit it any way you want, but this is your entree.
And that was an epic project. That
was an
that
epic
was
project,
supported.
yeah.
So, just two thoughts that go off of what we're talking about now. One is there is a summer program here at Stanford that's actually run by the Pre-Collegiate Studies program at Stanford, so it's aimed at high school students primarily. It's called the International Institutes, and it brings cohorts of students from a dozen countries all over the world with their teachers, and they come here, and for a period of 2 weeks they take different courses. And I think they generally live with each other, but they have this global solutions capstone that they work on for 2 weeks, and they work on it together. And it's something, I don't know the details off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of these international teams have to set up an island, which is a state. And so it is interdisciplinary by nature, because you have the politics and you have the culture and you have the economics and all of that, and they're working together. And so one question I had was, do your international students have any sort of formalized orientation week or something? Or something like this, some sort of team-based, and you bring in some of the local students as well, so it's a way for them to meet local students and local students to,
We have an orientation that I think we're all trying to expand. it's not that, really. It's more about how to be a student at the college in the U.S. when you're halfway around the world from home and all of your family's hopes and dreams and money rest on your shoulders. So
No pressure.
Well, I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
We've got things like, this is called cheating here. How do you email your professor? There are a lot more on the ground issues that get dealt with in that. Do you have a place to live? So I think it's a great idea, but I think it'd probably be hard to fit that in. There are versions of that.
But what if you expanded? What if you expanded the orientation to be something that happens not just at the beginning, but throughout the year? I love that.
It's just
a
fun.
great idea.
Hello. Yes.
I was just thinking about what you were saying about incentivization with the global studies students to try to get them to go. Well, I know on campus we kind of have these like workshops or various things, and I was thinking maybe you can offer the students extra credit in the 20 classes that you have listed up there to go to these workshops, so you guys can advertise the global studies program. And I think that would be a good idea.
Extra credit's always good.
And you can bring food.
Yeah.
And you can even make like other events, like you were just saying, food. You can have food from different cultures. Have students kind of go there and mingle with each other, kind of like talk about what they might want to see in a global studies program, or just kind of listen to what they're saying and see like what they might want to learn. And, I don't know.
So you're going to help me do that, right?
I could make flyers. I don't know. Sure. I can tell my friends. Global Studies Club. Like, how do we not have like an international relations club on campus? I don't know, but hella students are interested in that. Like, I think it would be huge.
If we could transform those month-long things, African American Month, Latino Month, all that, if we could make that more like a little connection to Africa, a little connection to Latin America. I mean, I'm out of there, so you're on your own. It's a good idea. I've always thought that those could be better if they were attached a little more internationally.
We need somebody to come, Scott, come on back for Epic or something, and how can we make those more robust or more interdisciplinary? So it's not just people coming to here, but it actually goes the other way too. How can we put a little bit of that in your physics course or whatever it is, right? All the courses on campus. How can we?
You could take Global Studies 1, and I bet this Intro to Global Studies, and I bet if you looked at the course outline and you just superimposed environmental science, I bet you could take your pet area and superimpose it right on that. And
It's pretty hard, I should say.
Course that
It
met
has
at
to
the
be,
college
yeah.
hour time for us that could go to these things too.
Yes.
Do you actually have a college?
Well,
A
theoretically.
theoretical college hour at least. And we're trying.
A college what?
We're actually doing a
college
collaboration this month on May 31st. We're doing a collaborative event with a couple of Stanford professors, including Mark Jacobson from your engineering department. He's our keynote on solutions, and we're calling it, an Eco Solutions Unconference. So it's got little mini lectures and stuff for that. But it is that model. We had the teach-in against the anti-racism. So we've got some models going on, but there's still not. There's a disconnect between these events and the curriculum right now, and that's what we're talking about.
Right. How do we
If
integrate
build
them?
the events, if the student services events part of life
to the
gets
curriculum.
more sync with this.
And this is what I think
It's funny,
Danny
there's a
did
funny
really well at
disconnect though,
CSM.
right? Like there's these events,
Right.
but they don't go for
There's-
units, and then they only go for units if, Meredith says, okay, you can get 5 points of
Right.
extra
And
credit.
this is what I think Danny
We've
did a
never,
really good
we've
job.
never formalized that either. And again, the Sierra model, the Sierra College model does that. So I hope that's still going. But it was at least going 5 years ago. The last time it was there was 5 years ago. Leo Chavez was our former chancellor.
Oh,
way back.
Leo
Was actually the
Chavez,
president, and he's since stepped down. But he went from our chancellor to their president. So he had a little.
Callie had a question, I think, is our comment.
Just a quick comment about thinking creative ways to kind of get around this. It's more grassroots, it's not institutionalizing it. But we had our One Love project between our two learning communities, and it was a nice scenario where the two classes were offered at the same time. One was with our Puente project and our community, one was with our Emoji community. And the instructors worked together to co-teach in quotes, but really what they did was their sections met in the same room. They reserved a room, and they watched different films. And so they, in a way, kind of brought them together to co-teach, and they each they taught at the same time back and forth. And then the students had to work on a community project together. So they had students go into groups, and they mixed the groups, from each class, and they had to do like a community service thing. So it was interdisciplinary in that regard, where they had to bring in a lot of different things. So it's kind of like a grassroots way to co-teach. So if you can organize the times of your classes, and then you just meet, reserve the cafeteria.
That wall used to be there.
So we've got about 6 more minutes, and then we'll head for the break. So is there any last questions or comments or complaints? I had a question, and maybe it's, to wrap it up, is we've heard about a number of different sort of impediments to setting up the degree, to getting it to flourish, to figuring out ways to integrate it into the system. Is there some magic group that you would love to see come together in one place in order to discuss all these problems? Like, should it be CSUs with the chancellor's office, with all of your deans, or like what would that look like in order to make these things better?
Like the dream team.
Right. Like what would that be? Like if we could going forward think about ways to
Stanford invited the CSUs.
Right, to expand on this kind of project.
Have a little summit.
I think
And
the
but we
CSUs is
set
what we
the
really need
agenda.
myself, but you're going to agree. But like, if we bring the CSUs in, it sounds like that's where we're really stuck. I mean,
Definitely the
Stanford-
CSUs.
A little Stanford magic might get us some.
Yes, and then also can I say,
Fairy
I've
dust.
always
Fairy
felt
dust.
frustrated as somebody who develops curriculum. I've always felt frustrated that I look at whatever the CID, I participate in CIDs, and then
What's a CID? I'm
so
sorry.
the
Common course
Actual-
outline, descriptor.
Okay,
of the
yeah,
course.
thank you.
So it'll mean the same thing in every
And
college.
you can get invited to participate, so you can say what you think should go into that course. But you are one of many people, and sometimes what I find is I'll say all this stuff, and then when I look at what they end up with, I'm like, nothing that I say. And now my course is going to get excluded because it's literally completely different. And so I've had that happen before, and I feel like it's all sort of so cold and systematized, and I wonder, who are these people? Like who? And sometimes they'll have meetings, like the CID had a meeting for the global studies, and they did somebody else at the same time, and that group was fighting a lot. I think it was ethnic studies. They were fighting a lot, and they had it at San Jose City. No, was it De Anza? Was it San Jose City? I think it was De Anza. And they always do them on a Saturday, which is tough for a lot of people. And anyway, and they do them in various places. So you might have to drive 3 hours, like it might be Sacramento or it might be Long Beach or somewhere like that. But but even more so, I feel like at the chancellor's office, I've always thought, who is this person? Like, I feel like it's like the Wizard of Oz.
I volunteered to do CID stuff. It's just people.
Back to the
rejected people's
Stanford
English
magic.
courses for not having
The
enough
degree
words.
reflects the CSUs who had faculty members also, who on their Saturdays drove to wherever,
Yes,
Sacramento,
that's
to
right.
participate. That's not all the CSUs, because I know from the engineering side, the early versions of the engineering one were heavily influenced by the 3 people in the room. You could
Right.
see it was their program. It didn't reflect the other CSUs. So a little bit of Stanford magic does to pull local large CSUs together to say, this degree right now gives students priority admission to these particular majors. Are there other majors that should be here?
And can I
So that
say,
students-
there's more than one way to kick a can down the road successfully. And I feel like this process, the way it's structured, makes a very myopic outcome. And I would like to see just a little more fluidity, a little more flexibility in the way, you know, and I feel like what happens is you get reduced to one piece of paper. And I'm not sure that's the best way to go. And
So you can be either, I mean, in engineering, we rejected it and we did another one and we got more people in. So I think this already exists, but
This
now.
is up again in what year? 2 years?
It'll be up 2 years from now, and to get the CSUs interested now in perhaps broadening the list of majors for which this serves as priority admissions preparation.
Yes.
That would
Yes,
help.
would be a good thing. I mean, it does develop, but it just seems very sort of stilted and very extremely structured, and you don't know who you're talking to, maybe by design. And so I just think if we develop these in collaboration, why are we not collaborating at all levels?
Well, that'll be what we do next year.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.